Give a quick look around the room, maybe look at your bookshelf or picture it if you can't see it. How many books have you read and how much of it did you retain? Or think about this, what about training at work? How much of that have you retained? This is a big problem, and today I'm asking how we can hack that and maybe, just maybe, how AI can help us. From the Soar Studios, this is the AI to Uplift Humanity podcast. I'm Justin Brady, and today I am joined by David M.R. Covey, keynote speaker, CEO, obviously the Trap Tales author, outsmarting the 7 hidden obstacles to success. David, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Justin. It's good to be with you.
I think the first thing we need to figure out is decoding the whole Covey name. There's Stephen Covey, there's David Covey, and there's Franklin Covey, and one of them is not a person.
that one that's not a person is Franklin Covey. Franklin Covey was the merger of Franklin Quest and Covey Leadership Center. Stephen Covey is my father, Stephen R. Covey, the gentleman that wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and I'm one of his sons. So I have an older brother too named Stephen M.R. Covey, who is also very active in the training industry. But it's interesting, when I was with my father traveling internationally, I got so sick of explaining who Franklin Covey was, which is just the name of a company, that I finally just conceded and said, Franklin Covey's my grandfather.
Yes, that's so good.
And people kept saying, hey, how old is he? Oh, yeah, he's really old. He's 95, still living life in crescendo, and comes out comes out to work every day. It's just an amazing guy.
Oh, that's so good.
Give my best to Franklin. I will.
Oh, man, that's so good. I was doing some Google searches on you, of course, doing my research before the show. And one of the Google searches was, how is Stephen Covey, David Covey, and Franklin Covey related?
All right.
So I had to razz you a little bit.
Did I clear it up for you?
Yes. I think hopefully this will become a Google snippet and everyone will be searching and finding this podcast for the answer. So I want to start with Trap Tales. Thanks for being a good sport, by the way. I want to start with Trap Tales, outsmarting the 7 hidden obstacles to success. Generally, what are those traps that are holding people back from hitting goals and achieving what they want?
Yeah, so the 7 traps that I focused on, of course, you can't be a Covey and have 5 traps, right? You
gotta have 7.
So the 7 traps I focused on are really the everyday workplace traps. Traps that you find in the workplace, in a work environment, that prevent people from either achieving their goals or reaching their vision. So, for example, the first 3 is busyness, procrastination, and ego. And, the idea with busyness is, when we're mired in the thick of thin things, drowning in the thick of thin things. Procrastination, of course, that's been around a long time. And all of us have procrastination problems and issues. That's certainly a trap we can fall into. And of course, ego. There's no ego. No one really has an ego in the world today, right?
Of course not. Absolutely not.
So those are the first 3. The next 3 are trigger, silo, and settling. These are traps as it relates to your interactions with others. So we are triggered. All of us have triggers, things that set us off at work. Most of us, or a lot of us, don't have a way to manage those triggers. Silo is this idea that we tend to sometimes operate as an independent in working on a team or working in a company. And we need to find more ways that we can better collaborate and integrate. Settling is often what we do in our job and our career. There's massive disengagement, as you know, globally. And a lot of us settle, and we really have 4 needs as human beings, that need to be taken care of. And if we aren't meeting, 1 or 2 or 3 or even all 4 of those needs, then we have disengagement. So I talk about the settling trap. And then the last trap is called the myopia trap. And that's the trap where we fail to see the big picture. We're kind of just stuck in the minutia, and we don't see how what we do every day, how it connects to the organization strategy.
Been there.
And mission and vision. So anyway, so these are very common modern traps that we fall into And I was enamored with traps because I like the idea that Kurt Lewin, who was an American-German psychologist, and he talked about anytime you enact a change, you have driving forces and you have restraining forces. Driving forces are like initiatives, things that we do, and the restraining forces are really like the traps, the obstacles that are getting in the way from us achieving success. And I think more of our focus in businesses today or in organizations today is really on initiatives and driving forces and not on the restraining forces.
Yeah.
So this is the book that says, hey, yeah, driving forces are important, but if you've got one foot on the accelerator and the other foot on the brake, you're not going to move forward.
Right.
The answer is not to put your foot harder on the accelerator. The answer is to take your foot off the brake or one of your feet off the brake, and that will help you move forward. And I would suggest that as well in business, that for us to move forward, we need to be aware of the traps that are holding us back.
Yeah, and one of the other things, you're a multifaceted guy because you were obviously co-chief ops at Franklin Covey. Yep. Great old great grandpa Franklin Covey, who's now 200 years old. But then after that, you formed SM Covey, and at that company, you work with a bunch of basically the world's leading authors and trainers. So you've worked with tons of authors and trainers. By the way, how many have you worked with, if you don't mind me asking? Because it's a big number. I don't even know if I know that.
Well, I've probably been through 200 training programs. Yeah. Talk about cuts, cutting yourself to death, having to go through 200 training programs.
And so go ahead.
But we currently work with about 50.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you are obviously licensing all their intellectual property globally and rolling out their training and helping with that. What patterns have stood out to you over the years interacting with all these top authors and trainers?
I think one of the biggest patterns is that there's not a lot of creative, innovative stuff, to be honest. A lot of stuff is regurgitated, and it's outdated, outmoded. And I think that it's hard to get, fresh new content. It takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of effort. So I really pride myself on that, the whole idea of the traps and becoming a trapologist, because it's fresh content. I could have rested on my laurels and did some takeoff from the 7 Habits or whatever, but I'm really trying to create some kind of new content. And I'm not just congratulating myself, but I'm saying, so I really appreciate people and authors that really do that. It creates some fresh, new, groundbreaking work. I think also, 300-page books. How sick are you of 300-page books? I think if you can't say it in 100 pages,
yes,
then something wrong, right?
I was just talking
in today's world.
I was just talking about this the other day on LinkedIn because one of my friends wanted to know about publishing, and I'm a failed author, and I was writing a book. I was writing a book pitch, and a literary agent was helping me pitch it to a bunch of organizations. And they all wanted, of course, two things, of course. They wanted these giant, thick books. I'm like, well, what if I can write it in 50 pages? And the literary agent was, then they're not going to buy it. They want something huge to sit on the shelf. And then the other thing he said is, this was years ago, you're not famous enough, no one's going to run your book. It doesn't matter about a good idea, you need to be famous. And you need to have a huge following. So I was a little, I was kind of turned off by that. But of the authors and trainers...
I don't think that's true, by the way.
I agree. I agree with you, of course.
I think if you really have some unique contribution to make or some unique insight to make, doesn't matter who you are. You can create an own niche for yourself and a place for yourself in that market by virtue of your amazing insight.
Yeah, 100% agree. And that's why after that, I just went out and made a podcast, and I'm really happy I did. That's a whole nother topic, people. But one of the things I wanted to ask you is, who stands out? Because you're very selective in who you get to work with. So which of the authors you work with right now, which of the trainers are really uplifting humanity, and they're really, they really have a fresh take?
So I'll mention one that I really like. I just finished her book. It is a 300-page book, but it was a really good read. Jenny Blake. It's called Free Time. She also wrote a book called Pivot. And her book is, again, it's called Free Time, Free Time. Lose the Busy Work, Love Your Business. But I really like it. It's a book really for entrepreneurs, small business owners. And most business books are not really oriented to small business owners. They're oriented more to business, but not to small business owners.
It's a
great I really
point.
like her niche. And I love that. I love how she gives you permission to do some crazy things, radical things.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And let me share maybe a couple of them, right?
Sure.
So I like how she says, purposely decide you're not going to be very good at email. And most people would be like, what? But it's true though. Email is really other people's agendas, and it can really take you off of your projects and your most important strategic and creative work. And I was just looking at this week, just got back from school break, spring break with my kids, and we were off and back. And of course, you come back and you have a bunch of emails. But I have a couple big projects I got to do this week, and I haven't even started yet. And the reason why I haven't started yet is that I've just been mired in my email, and I'm basically helping advance the cause for other people, which is about 70 to 80% of the email that most people get is advancing other people's agendas. But I haven't advanced my, two important projects. So I love that. I'm going to purposely decide not to be very good at email, give myself blocks of time, that I can do really strategic, creative work uninterrupted.
And it does show how effective you can be with email, though, right? Like if you're the one sending email about other people's agendas, then you're the standout. You mentioned regurgitation is kind of one of those things that everybody's doing all the time. There aren't that many new ideas, which, by the way, I think you're 100% right. What other big challenges are there in the training industry? Like regurgitation is one of the problems, but what is the other big problem in the training industry and one of the challenges you're trying to tackle? Yeah,
the biggest challenge, of course, is what COVID highlighted, and that's too much dependence on instructor-led training. You have like giant companies like Center for Creative Leadership, or even a company in my hometown called Vital Smarts, where they had 90 to 95% of their revenues came from face-to-face training, whether it was public programs or whether it was train-the-trainer options where you had, a person deliver, it's called ILT, instructor-led training. And I think that COVID has caused a lot of these companies to completely reinvent themselves, reinvent their business, and have more online offerings, on-demand offerings, other options in how people can access content. But I think the training industry, similar to like the publishing industry, has been a little bit slow and archaic in adapting and adjusting. There's some people that are still wishing and wanting the old days. And I think that a lot of the face-to-face will come back, of course, with COVID dying down. But I think that's one of the things is that this has not been an industry that has adapted very quickly.
Wow, interesting.
And adjusted very quickly. And it's not just, I'm not just picking on the training industry, which is the industry I'm in, but there's a lot of other industries like that as well. And, the lesson is that if you don't adapt and if you're not agile and flexible and willing to make changes quickly, you can become irrelevant.
Right.
And very, very fast. Doesn't take long nowadays.
I think one of the most I'll admit this to you, but I think one of the most embarrassing things to me is, and it happens all the time. It's happening less and less these days because I'm more aware of it. But it's when I read a book or I go through a training and I spend the money for it, and all of a sudden, like someone else says something about, oh yeah, I did this training, or I read this book and it changed my life in this way, or I did this habit because of this thing, and I'm like, what? That was in the book? I feel like I absorb and I don't really retain much of what I read and what I'm trained on. So how do you handle this? Like, how do you get stuff to stick? This is your industry. So are there any tips? Are there any strategies? Is this a problem?
It's a huge problem. You just highlighted one of the biggest problems. And the challenge is that training companies with their programs are asking people to do too many things. So at the end of the workshop, you go, maybe it's a 1-day workshop or 2-day workshop, but they're asking you to do like 35 things. And, it's like New Year's resolutions, right? Why do New Year resolutions don't work most of the time for most people? They don't work because most of us set too many. We're going to do 10 things. And we write them down and we're all thrilled. And, why do gyms ask you to sign a 1-year contract in January? Because they know that by February you won't be around anymore, right? So I think that the learning is we should ask people to do maybe 1 or 2 things coming out of a workshop. I mean, if you went to a workshop or if you read a book and that workshop or that book that you read asked you to make 1 or 2 changes, that was it, you'd probably do it, right? Because you'd remember it for sure. And if the whole focus was on, hey, make this 1 change or make these 2 changes, you'd probably do it. And I think the challenge has been is that we're asking too many things of our participants. And so rather than do, so you give them 35 things thinking that maybe 1 or 2 will stick, but actually none of them stick. Same thing with the strategy in a company. If you have a company that has 8 or 10 strategic things they're trying to implement, they're not going to do any of them with excellence, right? Just too many things. Human beings are not designed to do too many things. And this is why I admire someone like Steve Jobs in Walter Isaacson's biography. When he came back for his second act, Apple was very unfocused, if you can believe this. They were doing all sorts of things.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Steve Jobs spent 2 months, observing. Then he went up to the whiteboard and drew a 2x2 matrix and said, we're going to make 2 products for the consumer and 2 products for the professional, and everything else, all the rest of the projects go. They don't survive.
Yeah.
And everybody started freaking out. Like, how can you do that? But you look at now Apple, which has a $2.7 trillion market cap, and they get 90% of their revenues from 6 or 7 products.
Yep, exactly.
How can a company be that big and have that big of a market capitalization with 6 or 7 products?
Right.
One word: focus. They're focused.
It reminds me of the Jobs comment to the Nike CEO. I don't remember which one it was, but I think they were partnering on something. And I think his quote was, you can all Google it, everybody, but I think his quote was something like, Nike makes some of the best products in the world, but you also make a lot of crap. Just get rid of the crap and focus on the good products. Like, that was literally his advice, which was really good advice. If you do focus on 1 to 2 things at most, how do you make that stick? Because I hear what you're saying. You're simplifying things, you're clarifying, but I can think back to moments in my life, at least business aspects, better training, better email, whatever. I can think back to 1 to 2 things that I wanted to focus on, and I still didn't quite get it right. Are there any tips on focus is one thing, but getting anything to stick, is that still a problem?
Absolutely. So it's repetition and reinforcement. You've got to operationalize it. You've got to make it part of what you do in your day-to-day life. And it's very hard to fit new things in, as you can imagine. You got to make them more frictionless. Have you heard of a book by Wendy Wood? I forget the name, but let me tell you the
we can edit it in later, and I can do a voiceover and change my voice to make it sound like you.
Okay. So she talks about how anytime you want to implement changes, you got to make them frictionless. So she says, let's say you want to run first thing in the morning. Very hard to do. I found that, if I don't exercise first thing in the morning, I don't do it. So she says the way that she made it easier for her is that she went to bed in her workout clothes. She put her shoes by the side of their bed, her socks. So when the alarm went off, rather than let the mattress overtake her, she would be able to turn it off. She already had her workout clothes on. All she had to do is put on her socks, and her shoes were right there, and she's ready to roll. She's ready to go running. That's taking the friction out of the pain that it's involved in getting up, wandering around, looking for your workout clothes, deciding whether you really want to do this or not. And that's what we need to do with the changes that we're asking people to make, is we need to take the friction out of it and make it part of, operationalize it, make it part of, of our daily activities of what we need to do. So the way that we can do that is we can suggest, hey, you can ask this question of yourself. Maybe we have apps or email reminders that we can, tell people about, hey, this is the one commitment that you've had. A lot of times you need coaches, Weight Watchers, still a great program. Why is it great? Because you have a coach. You have somebody that you have to be accountable to. I've run 5 marathons. What's enabled me to run the marathons is that I publicly told a lot of people about it, and then I was committed.
Yeah.
I was emotionally committed. I also had somebody I ran with. So I wasn't going to, be a no-show to my runner on some of the long runs. So a lot of times having a coach or a partner or some kind of follow-up. So it's not enough just to say it and to repeat it, but then you got to be able to have reminders and, some other reinforcements, things that will help you implement it so it becomes part of your life.
Yeah.
And also you got to try to take out any of the frictions, make it more frictionless, anything that is getting in the way of implementation.
I mean, do you think AI can fill that role? Because I know that you've spoken with Clint and Paul, founders at Soar, about issues around this topic. So do you think AI can ever get sophisticated enough where it fills that role, where it's the thing kind of giving you those nudges and those feedback loops and that constant reminder?
I absolutely do. Yeah, absolutely. AI is like a system. It's just a system to remind you to do certain things, or a system to, to help you remember certain things that you want to remember. Absolutely. I think it's great as long as you don't have 20 other competing systems that are asking for the same thing. But yeah, for your most important activities, your most important projects, you can have some reminders or some questions that are asked, or something that will help bring it to the front of your mind. Those are all great things, and I think AI can do that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to ask you about next, which is what you're kind of going into, is obviously if technology wasn't a barrier, and because I'm not you're not a machine learning scientist, neither am I. I get asked the dumb questions on this podcast. But if you could build like your own personal AI robot thing that would do whatever the heck you wanted it to in the training space, like what would you build? What would that look like? How would David Covey build a perfect AI robot? That's what I want to know.
I think I would have certain points throughout the day, certainly something first thing in the morning, something I was headed off to work, something when I arrived at work, where I would have an AI robot tell me. For me, I think that would be helpful is to ask questions, really strategic, insightful questions that's going to keep me focused. Like, for instance, this morning, maybe one of the questions would be, okay, don't look at your email until you get 2 hours work done on your most important strategic projects. And that would be like, okay,
yeah,
thank you, robot. And then I already know that, but having a reminder or a question or something like that would be very, very helpful. That to remind me of my main purpose and not to get drawn into the trap of. And it's so innocent, just think, I'm just going to do a few emails. And then before you know it, emails always have problems. There's always issues in there. And that's what happens, is that you think that, it's just going to spend a minute or two, and then a big issue comes up or a big problem comes up. And then that takes you away, from doing that important strategic work first thing in the morning. So for me, I think my AI robot would be asking me a series of questions throughout the day.
I totally agree with you, because there are those those things you deep those deep things you do know, you do understand them, you have internalized that message, but there still does need to be the accountability. There does need to be that external reminder that nudges you the right direction, which, by the way, drives me crazy about myself, but I know it drives other people crazy about themselves too. But you do need that external nudging. You need just that little bit of accountability, like you said earlier. Like, I mean, ultimately, like health, right? Like a health coach isn't, to a certain point, a health coach isn't really doing much more for you. They're not really telling you something you already don't know, but that accountability and having someone there pushing you is a huge deal.
Absolutely.
What other aspects of tech? Because there's AR, there's VR, augmented reality, virtual reality, there's AI. What negative or positive impacts do you see in the training industry for this stuff?
Well, and I think that the negative impact is I just don't think that it can replace what human beings can do. You know, I mean, why do people go to? I have a son that goes to a lot of concerts, and I have another son that lives in Barcelona, and of course, my younger son was saying, "Hey, let's go visit, let's go visit my brother in Barcelona, and in the meantime, we can go to these concerts." Well, why do young people, or why does anybody go to concerts today? Because they want the live experience, right? It's the live human interaction and experience that you have at a concert that you can't have. It's not the same. You can listen to the music. It can even be clearer and louder, and the performance of the music can be fantastic, but it doesn't replace the real thing. And the real thing is the live interaction that you get at a live concert. And I think similarly, there's some people that say, oh, well, all training should just be online. Well, I disagree. If all training were online, you're not going to be able to have those human experiences that you can really have in some training experience. Now, some aspects of it can be, through AI and technology and so forth, but there are certain things that only humans can do, as in a way that makes it as impactful and revolutionary as it needs to be. Technology will never be able to do that. So that was my concern, is that people push it too far. But and again, I was arguing earlier, that this is sometimes the archaic and dinosaur industry where we don't change quick enough. So there are some things that we can absolutely, in this industry, adapt to in terms of using more technology. But let's remember, there's nothing better than this actual experience. People can remember. I have people come up to me and tell me an experience they had with my father teaching the 7 Habits to them. They cool. Remember where they were and what they were doing and why it was so impactful.
Yeah.
You're not going to have that where, hey, I was just sitting in my room and my technology bot told me to do this, and that that will forever change. I mean, I'm sure it maybe happened to one or two people.
I mean, maybe. I 100% agree with that, by the way. Like, I think a previous guest, I want to say it was Richard Collada, the CEO of ISTE, said AI shouldn't replace human experience. It should add value where there isn't. Something like that. I'm misquoting him, but that's basically what he said. I promised everybody a bonus round in this, so I want to ask you this question. How do we change behavior? This is one of the things you're very good at, and it seems impossible to me. So what is that one hack, that one big tip we can use to change people's behavior?
I think you have to get into their mindset. You have to get into the reasons why they should change that behavior. I think most people work on behaviors, and they work on cajoling and excessive reminding. I'll give you an example. I have 2 kids in high school, and they're good kids, but they are sometimes lazy and going to school and finishing their homework, just like any regular kids.
Right.
So the mindset I'm trying to create in them is, hey, look, your high school experience matters. Your grades do matter. It's important that you get on a right track. Because if you don't, you're not going to be able to get into, more of the prestigious colleges, and you're not going to be able to have, the opportunities to work at the more prestigious companies. And you're going to be limiting your life, your life opportunities. And I'm saying you don't see that now, but and I point out, a couple of their older siblings, where some took school more seriously, and I think are a little bit more advanced than some of the other siblings that didn't. And I really believe that. I mean, school's not everything, but education was always very important value in our family. And so I'm trying to shift the mindset. So rather than nag and get on them all the time, I'm trying to shift their mindset to see really the importance of that. It's starting to work. Right. It's not fully there yet, but I would just say that if you have problems with behaviors, the thing is not to do is to continue to focus on the behavior. You need to focus on creating a different mindset and have them change their mindset. Because once they change the mindset, the behaviors follow. But as long as you're there to try to nag them, they're not going to really do anything unless you're there to constantly nag them. And of course, that's not what the role you want to play as a parent or as a leader in an organization. So I think that the key to behavior change is to work on the mindset.
Right. No, absolutely. David Covey, keynote speaker, author, CEO of SM Covey, and of course, author of Trap Tales, Outsmarting the Seven Hidden Obstacles to Success. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Justin. Good to be with you.
And thank you so much for joining me and listening. Hey, before I let you go, wouldn't it be really cool if you could upload all your video and like magic, the entire video was searchable by keyword. You just put any keyword, any key phrase, and you're immediately taken to the exact timestamp and exact word or phrase that you typed in. Like all your video. Wouldn't that be kind of cool? Well, let me blow your mind. It exists. It's called deep search technology. It looks beyond descriptions and tags and keywords that you pre-select into the meaning and intent of a video, so you can search across your entire video archive and be instantly transported to the specific clip you were looking for at the specific timestamp. I know it sounds really expensive, but you can upload 10 hours for free and have deep search tech on your website if you just go to soar.com/deep search. Again, that's soar.com/deep search. SOAR.com/deep search. And hey, thanks for listening today. This is the AI to Uplift Humanity podcast.